My name is Nicholas Betts. I'm a Lexington resident. I work as a law clerk for a law firm in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm fighting hard to make sure that people have affordable and accessible higher education, well-funded K-12 education, accessible health care, and that we create clean, green, renewable energy source jobs here in the 6th District and across the United States of America.
So, Nicholas, is this your first experience in politics?
This is pretty much my first experience. Early on when I was in law school, I ran in a weak state delegate nomination process. That's kind of how I first got involved in politics. I've always been interested in public service, but this is my first time running in a general election.
So what drew you to it? Why now?
I think it's important that folks have choice on the ballot. I think that's good for democracy, good for any healthy democracy to have more than one choice, and I wanted to present an alternative to Congressman Ben Cline because I think we have different views on quite a few things.
So obviously Congressman Cline is the known here. He has a long career in politics and you're just coming in.
Sure.
What do you want voters to know since you are just coming in about what you stand for in comparison to him?
Well, I'm a hard worker. I listen to constituents. I've been across the 6th District talking to folks, seeing what they need, and I pride myself on speaking to folks and answering their calls and answering their emails. What I think is a difference is I believe right now, I think we both agree we're in a crisis, but I think we need to, invest in different resources that will help us recover and have economic growth in the future, whereas Congressman Cline seems to be more restrained on spending. I liken this current economic crisis to some of the most disastrous things we've had to endure as a country. During World War II, when we were fighting the Nazis, we didn't ask how we were going to pay for it. We fought the war, we won, we did have expanding deficits, but we paid them down later. I believe this is a supremely important thing that we need to do in terms of fighting this coronavirus pandemic. I mean, twice as many people have died in this pandemic as in World War I. That's the scale we're talking about. So we need to make sure that we have healthcare access for folks. We need to make sure that when this is over, that we invest in things that will generate economic growth, and while we're in the midst of it, we need to help people keep food on the table and roofs over their heads.
Going off of that, what do you think is the largest issue hovering over the 6th right now?
I think, one thing I hear a lot is broadband infrastructure. And, I really think that it's important that we move quickly on broadband infrastructure. I know some has been done, but, there's a lot of areas that don't have high-speed internet. And honestly, the internet is the highways of the 21st century. I mean, commerce is conducted, people educate themselves and their children on the internet, there's telemedicine, and we mobilized in the 50s to get the highway system done. We can mobilize right now and get broadband infrastructure put in place, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and going off of that, what is your list of priorities? If you go into Congress, which issues will you be looking to tackle, and in what order?
One of the first things I want to do is make the 0% interest rates on student loans permanent. I think that'll free up a lot of capital. A lot of folks will be able to buy things like homes that they might not be able to buy right now. They'll have expendable income to go to their local restaurants and businesses. And having said that, we also need to tackle the coronavirus pandemic, make sure that we get the personal protective equipment to hospitals and schools that need it, and we need to make sure that we develop a vaccine. So I think it's really a combination of making sure that we have programs which will allow for economic growth, as well as continue to fight the coronavirus pandemic.
And how much is the COVID-19 pandemic, how much will that shape what you hope to do in Congress?
It's something that we have to look at until it's solved. I mean, it's the economic devastation will probably be felt for years to come, and there was some recovery for some folks. The stock market recovered, but the stock market's not the entire economy. A lot of folks don't own stocks. There's still very high unemployment, although the unemployment rate's been stagnant around 8%. The workforce participation rate has dropped, showing that there's less people in the workforce, either because they're long-time discouraged workers or because they have been forced into an early retirement. So, we only have about a 61% workforce participation rate. So we have tremendous untapped potential if we can get folks back to work, create well-paying jobs and jobs that will be around in the future. So I think it's really important that we have programs in place that will help everybody recover from this devastating pandemic.
And going off of that, blanketing the whole district, there are so many different areas in the state.
Absolutely.
Whether it's urbanized areas like Roanoke, Lynchburg, Lexington, or the rural areas in between on I-81. How do you hope to bridge that gap and make sure, how do you look at the issues in terms of how they affect both urban and rural?
Sure, and I do think that, I've heard in all kinds of different places about broadband infrastructure, so I do think that that's something that's an issue. So I will say also that I've been to Zoom meetings across the district. I've, went to socially distanced events across the district whenever possible. And I think part of, bridging that gap is just getting out, doing the work, and listening to what people have to say, and trying to bring their voice to Washington. And that's what I'm going to do.
What are the distinct issues? Have you heard different types of priorities coming from, the more urbanized areas of the district versus the areas in between?
Sure. I mean, healthcare, I think, is a big issue for everybody. One thing that I want to do is establish a low-cost, affordable public health care option that allows people to opt out if they want to keep their private health insurance. But I think we've seen how crucial, healthcare is, for public safety, and it's a public necessity. And I believe that, if our friends and family and neighbors have healthcare, we'll all be safer. And I think it should be a right, but I think it's also a public necessity.
And when you look at the House of Representatives from a larger scale, it tipped into the Democratic favor during 2018. If you look at Virginia, it also tipped into the Democratic favor back in 2019. How optimistic are you that blue shift could come to the 6th?
I think it could. I know this is a historically tough district, but things change, and I think that people are tired of the status quo because we need to get things done, and we need to have representatives that are looking out for all the people. And it's been 30 years since a Democrat was elected in this district, but it was 30 years ago a Democrat won for the first time in 30 years. So things change, and just because one party's held a district for a while doesn't mean that's what it's going to be this year.
And with that challenge, the historical redness of the district, what keeps you going to say, I can win this?
Fighting for the people. I think at the end of the day, just listening to people, I've had people tell me, they voted for Congressman Klein last time and they never voted for him again. I think they feel like they're not being heard, and I'm listening, and, I'm going to fight for them.
Going off of that, Congressman Klein had a Democratic challenger in his first election to Congress and beat her very handily. What are you hoping to do different that Jennifer Lewis may not have done?
Every election is different. Things have changed dramatically since 2018, and I think that it was Congressman Klein's first time in Congress. He voted against a lot of things that I personally wouldn't have voted against, like the Families First Coronavirus Response Bill, the Ensuring Children and Child Care Workers Are Safe Act, the Great American Outdoors Act, which would have, which helps the national parks in our district. So I think his record is something I'm challenging him on, and I think that may make a difference this election.
And how do you hope to challenge his record when you're still building up your own?
Well, by listening to people, and I've worked in business, I've worked in education, I've worked in the legal field. I have a bachelor's and master's degree from Virginia Commonwealth University. I studied history, which I think is imperative in a time like this. And I have a law degree from Washington Lee University School of Law. So I have a well-rounded educational and professional background, and I think I'm a person that would be equipped to hit the ground running if elected to Congress.